Hi, I'm Randy Simmons for Eye on Art, and today's show we're going to be talking about lithography and the lithography process. With me today is Michael Crouse from Broken Stone Press in Lowertown, and Michael happens to teach printmaking classes for the West Kentucky Community and Technical College, also known as the new school, or Paducah School of Art. It's our new school that we have just started this semester. And I'm going to let Michael take it away and talk about the lithography process.
Well, thank you, Randy. We're going to kind of go through the whole process. Lithography is a printing process that's based on the premise that grease and water don't mix, and it's actually the same process that newspapers and magazines are printed. However, we're going back to the beginnings of lithography almost 200 years ago when it was first done on stone. And we're going to start the process by preparing a stone to draw on. And this stone is a Bavarian limestone. It comes from Germany, and we still use them in the fine arts world. The first thing to resurface a stone, because they can be used over and over again, is we're going to wet the stone and a levigator, which is made out of iron. And we're going to take a grit, and it's called carborundum grit, just like the carborundum sandpaper. And we sprinkle the grit all over the wet stone. Then we take the heavy, it's almost too heavy for me, levigator. And you gotta watch out here, it'll throw some water around. And we go through the process of removing about 1/64th to 1/32nd of an inch of the limestone. So we'll remove the old image.
So you're going to remove this entire pre-drawn image to start over again.
Right, to put a new image on. Each time we want to print a new image or create a new print, we have to remove the previous one. And we start by using a coarse grit, and then we will work our way up from coarse to a very fine grit. I'm using a 100 coarse grit, and I'll end up with a 220. Okay?
I bet you've developed a really strong right arm after
Yeah,
this.
my whole right side is out of whack with my left side. When I print, I use my right arm as well, as we'll see in a little bit. And then every so often, when we're graining our stone, we have to remove the grit. Then we also check it for scratches, because sometimes we'll get what's called levigator scratches, and we have a couple already. They're circular scratches. So I would go through this whole process, and I'd go to 220, 180, or excuse me, 180, 220, and then we'd be ready to draw on a fresh stone. And I have a fresh stone over here that we can start drawing on.
Okay, let's go check that out.
Okay. Now over here we have a freshly grained stone. Now if you notice on the stone there's a crack through the stone, and that's how I got the name of my studio, Broken Stone Press. I was printing earlier a few years ago, and it broke. And normally that kind of destroys the stone, but I mounted it to a backing plate, and I'm using the crack in my stone as a device to do kind of a diptych with a crack in it. And so it's something that's kind of unique to some of my imagery, and I decided to make my press that name. So we have a grain stone. It's sensitive to both grease and water. Many of my prints are multiple color, and I've already drawn and printed one color. and I am getting ready to transfer and to draw the second color, which would be printed on top of that. And normally how we do that is we print the first color on a piece of transparent material such as mylar, and then I can use that as a guide to know where to draw the second color. In traditional lithography, we have different drawing materials. We have what's called crayon pencils, and these are grease and wax pencils, and they come in various degrees of hardness and softness. And they handle a lot like a China marker, but when you draw with them on the stone, they also look a lot like charcoal pencils.
So this is a great translation for drawing into printmaking, is to
Yeah,
lithography.
stone lithography is the closest form of printmaking to actual drawing there is. Then we have crayon pencils. There's a new brand called Stone's crayons that work the same way. We have other material such as rubbing ink, which puts on kind of a cloudy atmosphere. It's greasy. And we can add values and get kind of a cloudy effect and modeling. And
That's really nice. Once you put a mark down, there's no taking it back, is that right?
well, we can scrape, we can do some scraping. I'm going to demonstrate that in a second. And then when we process the stone, we can remove things. But a lot of times, once it's there, though, it's hard to do. Then we have other devices like large crayons for people like to draw gesturally and do large drawings on the stone. Then we have another material. It's called tush, and it's the liquid. It's a liquid material that goes on the stone or the plate. It comes in a paste form, and then we mix it with water to get different values. And we can use a brush, and we can paint the tush just like you would an India ink and wash drawing or a watercolor. And the tush has a unique feature that when it dries in kind of riplets, or like coffee on a formica. And that's called reticulation, and that's a lithographic uniqueness.
Now, the stone is also receptive to the grease in your skin.
Right, you want to be careful that you don't touch the stone very much. Another advantage to working with a stone, that we can work subtractive. When I add my drawing, when I'm using a crayon pencil or a tablet or a tush, that's called an additive process. We're adding something. Lithography is really nice for using subtractive processes. We can start with our grease on our stone, and then we can start scraping it away and creating some interesting effects.
That's really nice.
And then, we can use the needles and stuff. And some of my stones I've done is I'll paint the whole stone black with tush, and when it's dry, then I start just scraping away and working from light to dark. We can also work with other, especially if we have soft drawing materials. We can work with traditional blenders and get all different kinds of effects.
Do these pencils come in different degrees of
Right,
black?
yeah. Right.
Greasiness, I guess I should say.
Yeah, that's a soft, and the number 5s are the hard. So it's a really responsive medium. Unlike other printmaking techniques where you have to do a technique separate in the whole process, you can combine processes and techniques in one stone.
Michael, how long have you been doing lithography?
Over 30 years now. So
30 years.
Yes. Okay, we can move on.
Sure, okay.
To a processing phase. Once we have our drawing finished, we just can't go to the press and start printing. We have to, what we call, stabilize the element. Right now, our stones that we're drawing on, and with this stone, with the drawing finished, it is still sensitive both to grease and water. And what we need to do now is we need to process the stone, so just the drawing areas are grease loving and water repellent, and the non-drawn areas are water loving and grease repellent. And so what we do is we mix up a solution It's a gum Arabic. It's kind of like the material on the back of a stamp, the old-fashioned stamps. And we put small amounts of acid, phosphoric acid or nitric acid or tannic acid or combinations of acid, depending on the complexity of our drawing and what drawing materials we use. If we put too much acid in, we'll burn out these light values. And if we don't put in enough acid, we'll fill in those darker values.
And I guess with the right amount of history and experience with this, you come to know
Right.
when is the right amount.
Right. We have charts we can go by, but they're just general. And it's just how you draw with the pencils and the crayons, and your drawing pressure determines a lot. So what we have to do, so we pre-mix our etch, which I've already done according to my drawing. Then we have to prepare the drawing to protect it from the action of the etch. We call it an etch, but it's not like an etching etch. And we sprinkle a little bit of finely ground rosin, and we just lightly, so we don't smear it, lightly dust the image, and that helps protect the drawn material from the effects of the acid in the etch. Then we want to put on it, we call it talc, it's French chalk, kind of like baby powder. And that kind of allows us to, we're going to have to buff down our etch as we'll see in a minute, and this helps keep the drawing from smearing.
So you save everything. I just noticed you putting the powder back in there.
Oh yeah. So everything, there's only a few places in the United States that sell printmaking materials, and they're not around here, so.
Well, we're talking about the prices of stones, and a stone like this today would how much would something like this cost?
Close to $2,000 without shipping.
Wow, and you said these are imported from Germany, is that right?
Yes, yeah. They last a long time, unless you break them. So I'm pouring my etching solution on there, the gum Arabic with the acid. And what that's doing is, all the limestone that does not have grease on it, even the little bits of limestone in that white, the gum Arabic is attaching itself to the first molecule layer of that limestone, and it's bonding with it. And it's going to make that limestone water-loving and hopefully grease-repellent. And we call that an adsorb layer of gum. And then the acid is also helping the fatty molecules in our drawing material penetrate into the limestone, and we call that our printing base. And so we cover the whole stone, the image, as well as the border and the edges.
This is a lot of process to go through.
Yes, it is. And I'm kind of cutting corners too, so I'm doing them quickly.
Well, what are the advantages of lithography over just doing a charcoal drawing of this?
Well, a lot of us just love the sensuousness of drawing on the limestone. It's a wonderful. Then obviously the other benefit for printmaking is the idea that you can print more than one. There's kind of a democratic notion that you can share your art with more people.
Right, and when you print a series of these, that's called an edition. And you can print, I'm sure, up to a certain point. Is there a time where the stone starts to wear thin with the image?
Ideally, if you maintain your chemical balance and you mix up the right kind of ink, you should be able to print thousands of them.
Wow.
But practically speaking, wear and tear and you might be able to print 100 or less. And so I usually do small editions of 10, 15 prints. Once we have left the etch on there, then we have to wipe up the excess, and we have to buff it down tight. We don't want any of the gum to dry on top of our drawing material.
If it does, you have to wash it back off and
Right,
start over
yeah.
again.
And we use, I use cheesecloth because I can use them over and over again. One of the words we use a lot in lithography is tight, because we do a lot of buffing of different materials. And so I'm doing a tight buffing. Okay, now we have processed the stone, but I'm not ready to print, except we're going to be printing a different stone. I will let this sit overnight, and then I'll have to roll it up with black ink. I replace the drawing material with black ink, and then I have to process it again.
Wow. So you're almost like a chemist, too.
Somewhat, yes.
One thing I've always heard about printmakers is that they know their paper as well as their chemistry.
Yes, printmakers usually have a love of paper, and there are just literally hundreds of different types of paper. And paper has different qualities, and there's a lot of lovely papers, a lot of French papers that we use in lithography.
Okay, and we've got another process to go to now?
Well, we're going to go to the printing process now.
Okay.
So we've prepared our drawing for printing. This one's not ready to print yet because I have to process it again, but we have one ready to go.
Okay, let's take a look at it.
Once we're ready to print, we place our stone on a printing press, and it's a lithographic printing press, which is a little different than an etching press. If you notice, we don't have a top roller like most printing presses. We have a system that's called using a scraper bar. And this is an example of a traditional scraper bar made out of maple and with a leather strap stretched over it. Because of the thickness of the stone and unevenness of the stone, a roller won't work. And so a scraper bar with leather and wood will accommodate the printing much more effectively. But it presents a problem, and so if we have, here we have one made out of a man-made material, out of plastic. So we have to have what's called a tympan, which is a slick material, this happens to be mylar, with grease on it. And so that'll allow, when we put the pressure on the stone, it'll allow the stone to slide through the press, which you'll see in a second. So we have our stone, it's centered. The scraper bar has to be shorter than the width of our image so we don't ruin the scraper bar. We have to start the scraper bar on the stone, and we're not supposed to run it off.
Right, and you could damage your stone as well if it slips off.
Yeah,
and you go through.
You can break the stone. One reason the traditional ones were made out of wood is if something was going to break, you were hoping the scraper bar would break before the stone. We also have to set up our printing area. We have 2 bowls of water and several sponges. We have a bowl for clean water and one for dirty water. Remember, grease and water don't mix, so we're going to have to dampen our element when we print.
It's almost like a cooking show.
It is a cooking show. We have, I have some black lithographic ink. It's an ink that has a varnish in it that gives it tack. And like cooking, we have different ingredients we have to add to the ink depending on the consistency of the ink and the type of image. Sometimes we may need to add something to make the ink shorter, and we add what's called magnesium carbonate. Other times we have to make the ink longer. We mean short and long. This is a longer ink because it runs off of our knife. Short ink will not run off of our knife. To make our ink longer, we add some what's called litho varnish, linseed oil that's been boiled. Once I mix my ink up to the proper consistency, and that comes with experience as well, I then roll out a slab of ink. And one of the unique pieces of equipment in lithography for printing is using a leather roller, a wooden and leather roller. This is the hide side of a leather roller is wrapped over a core of wood. And it is a very ink receptive roller, and it allows us to really manipulate how much ink and where we put it on the stone. Now, one of the problems with a leather roller is I can never clean this, and so I have to leave it in black ink and keep it covered and scrape it and keep putting new ink on it every week. And obviously I can't print other colors. Now I have traditional rollers for printing colors. So we have our setup ready. We have our ink laid out and rolled out. We have our water going, and we have our stone. So what we're first going to do is we're going to dampen our stone. We have to wet the whole image and the edges of the stone. We want it damp, but we do not want standing water on the stone, because then our ink will become waterlogged. And that's why we have a dirty bowl.
So you do this by yourself, but it would help if there was a second person to
Yeah.
do that.
And then we use our leather roller, and we kind of roll first fast to drive the water off the image area. Then we want to go in different directions. Smaller stones are a little bit easier to print than larger stones, because with this size roller and my large stone over there, it's a little bit more difficult to ink it up uniformly. Then we have to come back, and there will be a little bit of water, so I have to physically work the roller to get that, it's called beading, get that water off my roller. And I have to hear that tack, and I need to see a smooth film of ink on. And then I have to go back. Yeah, it works a lot better, Randy, if I have an assistant.
Is that a hint? Should I be helping you out?
Sure,
here?
you can help
All right,
me
I'll get
out.
on the other
Let's
side.
Get on there. Randy's he's a printmaker as well.
So go one more time?
One more time. Okay, we'll proof it after this one, Randy.
Okay.
So we don't want to wet it before we proof it. But sometimes when I want to charge, this is called charging my roller, I want to charge it. So we can just take and go around the edges a little bit to clean it up. Okay. Then we want to dry the printing element. The first couple of times I'm printing the lithograph, I don't know how much ink to put on it, and I don't know how much pressure. And so I usually start conservatively, not a lot of ink and not a lot of pressure, then I'll work my way up to the right pressure. So consequently, the first few prints might be too light, hopefully. If they're too dark, that can spell disaster down the road. So we have ink on our, we have grease on our tympan, and we have it lined up, and we have our pressure. Then we engage with the pressure onto the stone. Release the pressure. You gotta break that little grease seal there. The part of lithography I dislike the most is having to deal with this grease. It just seems to get everywhere.
Oh, I can imagine.
And it can ruin a sheet of paper, just a little bit of it.
And you were talking about doing a test run, which could be called artist proofs. I guess you do the artist proof on good paper once you get it to the level that you think that you need to be at, and do some artist proofs, and then you get to the actual edition of the litho.
So this is a print I'm working on with a printmaker, painter in Lower Town, Marty Utzler, and
that looks really good to me.
Yeah, she's been doing a number of really strong works with me. That's another aspect of my studio, is I use my expertise and help other artists with prints. Now we have to keep, if we're going to keep using our element, we have to keep it damp. Remember that adsorb layer we put on there?
Right.
That if we let the stone dry out too long, the elements in the air will deteriorate that layer, so we want to protect it with water.
So technically, you're pretty satisfied with the print,
right?
And so now we would move on to printing on real paper.
We're going to try a sheet of real paper. So once I have to I can't daydream too much, but I have a habit of doing that. I have to remember how much ink I have on here, how many times I go back and forth for each print to keep the consistency up.
Should I wet this?
Yes, go ahead. I'll start my roller at different parts of my image each time to make sure I try to get it evenly rolled up. Another time, Randy.
Okay.
Very good. When I roll fast, I'm putting down less ink and I'm evening it out. When I roll slower, I'm putting down more ink. So you can kind of control where and how you ink your image by the speed of the roller. Okay, let's try one more, Randy. Okay.
All right, so we're ready for the good paper after
Good
this.
paper.
I remember in grad school we had these manual fans that would spin them around and rather than use hair dryers.
I used mine for years until my students started making fun of me. They all used hair dryers, so I joined the crowd. Okay, now I have a little ink on my hands, and we don't want to get fingerprints on the paper. So I'm going to put a little baby powder, and that helps dry it. Okay, I have a sheet of nice Arches cover printmaking paper. And we want to protect the back of the paper. We don't want to get grease from the tipping on there, so we're going to put a clean sheet of newsprint. Get our tipping. It normally takes more pressure to print on higher quality paper than it does newsprint, so I'm going to give it a little more pressure.
And you need a little muscle for this job, too.
It gets harder every year, Randy.
And hopefully we'll have a masterpiece.
Whoops, going the wrong way.
And this is the fun part right here, is pulling the print back and seeing the beautiful image. Look at that. What a great way to end the show there. Great. Wonderful job. Thank you, Michael, for having us, and we're going to wrap it up for this episode of Eye on Arts, and maybe we can come down again sometime and see what you're into.